Welcome, crew, guys, gals, ghouls, friends, fiends, foes, and otherworldly beings. Let's climb aboard the mothership, secure our tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high. Get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. I'm your ghostess, TessaTNT, and I am broadcasting live from the Mile High Clubhouse tonight. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Thanks for coming on out and hanging out with me. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope you enjoy the podcast as much as I do. If you want to listen in your free time, whether you're working it, or working out, feel free to check us out on Spreaker.com under We Are Paradox Media, and anywhere else you listen to your podcasts and broadcasts. You should be able to find us everywhere, and if not, you should let me know at weareparadoxmedia@gmail.com, and I will get right on that. Alright, so it is story time with me, TessaTNT, and we have been reading Dr. Stephen King's book, You Like It Darker Stories. It has been quite good. I've enjoyed it, at least. Alright, let's hop on into it, shall we? We are on chapter Dreamers, and this is a section out of it, page 936. I drove with the windows open and the air conditioner on full. I was wearing a pair of Elgin's nitrile gloves and had been since I got in the car. Twice more, black things came out of the air. Hold on a second. Black things came out of his nose and once from his gaping mouth, but the moving air took them out the passenger window. I drove in the direction of Lewiston, Auburn, but had no intention of going that far. I knew where I lived. His Minot Avenue address had been on the release form, but there was no way I was going to drive him into the Twin Cities, not with still having to get him over into the driver's seat. I needed a quiet place to do that. I was on Route 119 in Waterford when I came to the Wolf Claw rest area. In the heat of the day, no one was there. I parked under the trees and went around to the passenger side and opened the door, and unclipped the seatbelt, and Devereaux went leaning forward until his forehead was resting on the dashboard again. I wished I had asked the gentleman scientist for one of his masks, but what good would covering my mouth and nose do? The black filaments had come out of Devereaux's eyes. They could just as easily go into mine. I would just have to hope they were all gone. I hadn't seen any for the last 10 miles or so, but they might have come out and flown away through the open window while I was watching the road. I tilted him forward toward me and caught him and pulled him out of the car and dragged him around the hood. He was wearing loafers and one of them came off. His blank eyes stared raptly into the sun. I got him behind the wheel, but it took time and wasn't easy. I hadn't expected it to be. He was breathing but dead inside, and I knew from Nam that dead people are heavier. They shouldn't be, but they are. Gravity is greedy for the dead and wants them in the ground. Just my opinion, but others share it. He tilted forward again, and I grabbed him by the back hair and pulled him up before his forehead could hit the horn. I fastened his seatbelt, and his head sank into his chin. And then into his chest. I thought that was alright. I hoped no one would come until I got the righteous fuck out of there. I put the keys in the ignition and closed the door and started down Route 119. I had walked about a quarter of a mile before I remembered the shoe and went back. Somebody will be there by now, I thought. Someone who looked in the open window of the Chevy with the St. Dom sticker on the bumper and said, "Hey, mister, wake up. And hey, mister, are you all right?" And by the way, mister, what are those black things coming out of your nose? But no one was there. I picked up the loafer and opened the driver's door again and put it on his foot. Then I brushed out the tracks going around the front of the car, the one his heels had made, and set off walking again. About 5 miles down the road, my shadow now starting to drag out long behind me, I came to a combination general store and gas station, with a phone booth on the side. I had enough change in my pocket so I didn't have to go into the store where someone might see and remember me. That probably would have been alright, but by then I was thinking like a thief or a murderer. I called Elgin, wanting a ride. Elgin didn't answer, and I had to come alive enough to feel scared. I had a plan now, one that might get me and the gentleman scientist in the clear. But plans change. I kept thinking of him saying, "Proof, proof." I kept thinking he was crazy, and then I thought of how I knew that. I knew it all along, but said fuck it and drove on. I turned back the other way, my shoulder now drawing out longer and longer before my rather than behind. A car came and I stuck up my thumb. It passed me by. So did the next one, but then came a pickup that slowed and stopped. The man driving had a weathered red face under a gray brush cut. "How far are you going?" "Castle Rock. It's where my father lives." "We'll hop in. Did you serve? You got that look about you, and you're the right age for the current fuckadiddle." "Yes, sir, I did." "So did I, about 10,000 years ago. Semper Fi if you like it, and Semper Fi if you don't." He let out the clutch with a jerk and talked about Korea and asked me what about those haysnicks. Haysnicks. Said that's right. He said, "Ship them all out there to Hate Fuxbury," and I said that's right. He offered me a beer from behind the seat. I took it, and when he said, "Take another, soldier," I did. Half an hour later, he pulled over to the curb of Main Street in the Rock. "We're going to beat those gook sons of bitches." "Yes, sir." "Take care of yourself, son." "That's the plan." Off he went. By then it was evening, and more thunderheads building up in the west. I walked the 6 miles out to Lake Road. By the time I got there, the train was beating its way across the lake again. Lightning flashed, thunder rolled, the smell of ozone in the air like an unburned burning. My car was still parked next to Elgin's Mercedes. I went inside. He hadn't turned on the lights, and the hall was a bowl of shadows. "Elgin?" I got no answer. The living room was empty, books knocked over. Beyond the wall of sleep was face up. On the coffee table was a glass ashtray and a pack of Winstons and a Zippo. I took the Zippo and put it in my pocket. I went to the former dining room, thought about going into the room with the couch, fortunately thought better of it. I went into the room with the desk instead and sat in the chair, and looked through the one-way glass. What was left of Elgin, the gentleman scientist, was on the couch. Polaroids scattered all around. The beaker shattered among the photographs. His head was in what looked like a black sack. Some of the photographs, those that were face up, showed it forming over his sleeping face. The picture of the red house with the green door was also on the floor, and so was the plastic bag into which he had put his samples. Now the bag was empty. That black sack on his head was made of those filaments. It sucked in and out from what was left of his mouth as he breathed. I thought about him telling me of endless universes both out there and below our very feet. I thought of a face sliding down a man's skull. I thought of a helicopter on fire sinking into the very sea of napalm it had created. I thought of putting Devereaux's shoe back on his foot. I thought of all the unknown and unknowable nether creations that might exist beneath a barrier of dreams. I thought that yes, plans change. Eldon could no longer get out of this, but maybe I still could. Some of the black filaments saw me and rose from the black bag and crossed the room and plastered themselves on the glass. More came, and more. I watched as they squirmed around until they made my name, William Davis. There was a gas stove in the kitchen. I turned on all the burners and blew out the blue gas flowers one by one. I turned on the oven and opened the oven door. The pilot light came on in there and I blew that out too. As I created this nascent gas bomb, I looked constantly over my shoulder for the black filaments. I was in Sukinhai, terror. I was in Rung Rong, horror. I closed the windows, I closed the doors. I went around to the guest house and gathered up my belongings and my duffel bag in one suitcase. I put them in the trunk of my car, then I went back to the stoop and waited, clicking the top of the lighter up and down. Lightning pan-fried the lake and thunder rolled. After about 10 minutes, the rain started, at first just pattering down the storm's foreplay. I opened the door. The gas was a stench. I flicked the Zippo and got a flame and tossed it and ran for my car. I got there and had just decided nothing was going to happen when the kitchen exploded. The rain came in a deluge as I drove away. In my rear view, I saw the house burning like a candle under a black sky cut with lightning. There were houses and summer cottages on Lake Road, but no one was out in the storm, and if anyone was looking out a window, they would have seen nothing but an amorphous car-shaped blob behind headlights. I drove out of Castle Rock and into Harlow. The rain slackened, then stopped. In my rearview mirror, just before the sun sank behind the mountains in New Hampshire, I saw a rainbow. Then the sun was gone and the rainbow clicked off like a neon sign. I stayed the night at the motel in Gates Falls and drove to Portland the next morning to the rooming house where I had been living when I worked at Temp O. There was a rooms for rent sign in the front window. I rang the bell and Mrs. Blake answered. "You again?" "Yes, sign says you've got a room." "That's right, but not your room. It's on the 3rd floor and there's no air conditioning." "Is it cheaper than the one on the 2nd? "No, I'll take it." The next day I went back to Tempo and got rehired. I had no plans to spend very long working for Mrs. Frobisher, but I wanted to have a job when the cops came. Pearson was in the break room, so was Diane. There was a talk show on the TV. Diane gave me a crooked little smile and said, "Once more into the breach, dear friends." Pearson was reading the paper, sections piled up around his shoes. He took one look at me and raised the paper again. "So you came back," I said to Diane. "So did you. Didn't work out at Elgin's house?" "It did for a while, then didn't. He started getting strange when his experiments didn't work out. And here we are. All roads lead to Tempo." Mrs. Frobisher came in. "Who wants a depot at Brune and Cathcart?" She didn't wait for an answer, just pointed to a new woman I didn't know. "You, Janelle, chop chop." Pearson was done with the local section of the paper, so I picked it up. On the bottom of the page, 1B, was a story headlined. "Castle Rock Man Dies in Gas Explosion at Dark Score Lake." It said the case was being investigated as an accident or possible suicide. It said that because of heavy rain the fire hadn't spread. I said, "Holy shit, my last boss is dead," and showed Diane the story. "Bad luck for him, good luck for you." She read the story. "Was he suicidal?" I had to think that over. I don't know. The next day I had court. When I went back to the rooming house, 2 cops were waiting for me in the parlor. One was in uniform, the other was a detective. They introduced themselves and asked how long I had worked for Elgin. I told them about a month. I told them what I had told Diane, that Elgin started to get dinky-dow when his experiments hadn't been panning out, so I left. Yes, I had been living in the guest house, but moved out when I quit the job. No, I hadn't been there when his house blew up. They asked me if I knew a man named Burton Devereaux. I said I knew the name. It had been on Elgin's list of test subjects, but not the man. I had never seen him. The detective gave me his card and asked me to call him if I thought of anything. I said I would. I asked if the detective thought Elgin had killed himself. Would that surprise you, Mr. Davis? Not a lot. He turned on the gas stove and we found a melted chunk of lighter on what was left of the floor. So what do you think? What I thought was a smart detective might have wondered if they found the remains of the Zippo in the kitchen, how Elgin could be on his subject's couch in the dining room, but I guess he wasn't that smart. I worked at Tempo until September, then quit and drove to Nebraska. No reason for Nebraska, it was just where I went. I got temporary work on a farm, one of those big agribusiness spreads, and the foreman kept me on after the harvest season passed. I'm here now. It's snowing a blizzard. I-80 is shut down. I sit at this desk thinking of galaxies beyond galaxies. In a little while, I will close this notebook and turn out the lights and go to bed. The sound of the wind will lull me off to sleep. Sometimes I dream of the boondocks and men screaming on fire. Sometimes women screaming in fire. Children, non-tu, they cry, non-tu, non-tu. Those are the good dreams. You might not believe it, but it's true. In the bad dreams, I am standing outside a red house with a green door. If I tried that door, it would open. I know this, and I know one day I will go in and kneel at the living room doorway. Non-tu, I will cry. Non-tu. But when this final dream comes, there will be no mercy, not for me. Thinking of Cormac McCarthy and Evangeline Walton. The Answer Man. 1. Phil Parker had the great good fortune, or great ill luck, to meet the Answer Man 3 times during his life. On the first of these occasions, in 1937, he was 25, engaged to be married, and the possessor of a law degree on which the ink had almost dried. He was also caught on the horns of a dilemma, so fierce that his eyes watered each time he thought of it. Nonetheless, it had to be thought about, unresolved in one way or the other. To that end, he left his apartment in Boston and came up to the small New Hampshire town of Curry, where his parents owned a summer home. Here he planned to spend a decision-making weekend. He sat on the deck overlooking the lake with a 6-pack of beer on Friday night. He thought about his dilemma, slept on it, woke up on Saturday morning with a hangover and no decision made. On Saturday night, he sat on the deck overlooking the lake with a quarter bottle of old-time ginger ale. He woke up on Sunday morning with no decision made, but with no hangover. A plus, but not enough. When he got back to Boston that evening, Sally Ann would be waiting to find out what he had decided. So he climbed into his old Chevrolet after breakfast and went motoring along. New Hampshire back roads on a gorgeous, sunshiny October day. The trees were in full autumn flame, and Phil pulled over several times to admire various vistas. He reflected that there was no beauty like New England beauty at the end of the cycle. As morning drew on toward noon, he scolded himself for dilly-dallying. Getting drunk on beer hadn't solved his problem, simping ginger ale hadn't solved it, and mooning over fall foliage wouldn't do it either, and yet he suspected that his absorption in the scenery was quite a bit more than communing with nature. It was either part of the solution or his mind's effort to squirm away from a decision that would, one way or the other, set himself and his fiancée on a lifetime course. It's part of growing up, he told himself. Yes, but the idea of choosing one single thing was abhorrent to him. He knew it had to be done, but that didn't mean he had to like it. wasn't it a little like picking the prison cell you wanted to spend your sentence in? Your life sentence? That was silly and overblown, yet it wasn't. His dilemma was simple and clear-cut, as most of the real ball-breakers are. Where was he to practice law? Each choice was full of ramifications. Phil's father was a senior partner in an old Boston law firm of the white shoe variety. Warwick Lodge, Nestor, Parker, Alberton, and Fry. Sally Ann's father was a senior partner in the same firm. John Parker and Ted Alberton had been best friends since college. They had married less than a year apart, each serving as the other's best man. Phil Parker had been born in 1912, Sally Ann in 1914. They were playmates, growing up and maintaining their liking for each other even during that difficult period in early adolescence, when boys and girls tend to express a public disdain for the opposite sex, no matter what they may feel privately. The parents on both sides might have been the least surprised people on earth when Phil and Sally Ann began to keep company, as the saying was in those days, but neither couple quite dared to hope that their children's affection would survive 4 years of separation. The sorrow for Sally Ann harbored for Phil. When it did, the parents were delighted, as were Phil and Sally Ann, of course. Love wasn't the problem, at least not directly, although love played a part, as it almost always does. Curry was the problem. That small town near Maine, New Hampshire state line where the Parkers and Albertons had summer homes on adjoining lakefront lots. Phil had been in love with Curry at least as long as he had been in love with Sally Ann, and now it seemed he might have to choose between them. He wanted to hang out his shingle in Curry, although it boasted only 2,000 year-round residents. The downtown area where Route 23 crossed Route 111 consisted of a restaurant, 2 gas stations, a hardware store, the A&P, and the town hall. There was no bar, no movie theater. For those amenities, you had to go to North Conway, quite some distance away. There was an elementary school in those days called Grammar, but no high school. Curry teens made their glum bus ride to Patton High, 10 miles away. There was also no lawyer in town. Phil could be the first. The Parkers and Albertons thought he was crazy to even consider Curry. John Parker was hurt and angry that his son was thinking of not joining the firm, where his grandfather had been a senior partner back in the horse and buggy days. He also found it difficult to believe, he said, that a young man who had graduated cum laude from Harvard Law School would even consider practicing in the wilds of New Hampshire, which he called the forgotten wilds of New Hampshire, sometimes after a cocktail or two, the misbegotten wilds. Your clients will be farmers suing each other over cows breaking down fences, John Parker said. Your biggest cases will involve poaching or fender benders on Route 23. You can't be serious. But the dismay on his face made it clear that he knew his son might be. Ted Alberton was even angrier than his old friend. He had one special reason to be angry other than the ones John had already voiced to his son. Phil would not be committing a wanton act of destruction upon his future alone. He was planning to take a hostage, that hostage being his daughter. When Phil persisted, Alberton had drawn a line in the dirt, one that was deep and harsh. "I'll forbid the marriage, sir," Philip had replied, keeping his voice level and, he hoped, polite. "I love Sally Ann. She says she loves me, and she's of age." "You mean she could marry you without my consent?" Ted was a big, broad-shouldered man, partial to suspenders, which he called braces. His blue eyes could be warm, but that day they'd been like flints. "That's true, she could, and I like you, Phil, always have, but If you were to do what you're considering, any marriage would take place without my blessing. And that, I believe, would make her very unhappy. In fact, I rather doubt she'll do it." Phil had looked into those flinty eyes and understood Ted Alberton was understanding the case. He was sure Sally Ann wouldn't do it. Phil didn't know if she would or not, especially if Mr. Alberton decided against the cash dowry. Phil knew Sal understood what he wanted more clearly than their elders, who either wouldn't or couldn't understand at all, and he knew part of her wanted it too. After all, she'd also grown up spending her summers and the occasional snowy and magical Christmas in Curry. She was willing to listen when Phil told her that he believed Curry and all of southern New Hampshire was going to grow. "It'll be slow getting started," he said to her that summer, when he still had hopes of bringing his parents on board with his tentative plan, if not the Albertons. "The Depression's not really going to end for another 7 years or so unless there really is a war. My dad thinks there will be, but I don't. The growth is going to start in the North Conway area and spread from there. By 1950, there will be more highways. More highways mean more tourists, and more tourists mean more businesses. The new people will come from Massachusetts and New York, Sal, and they'll come by the thousands. Tens of thousands, to swim in clean lakes in the summer, to watch the leaf change in the fall, to ski in the winter. Your father thinks I'll live poor and die poor. I think he's wrong." Unfortunately, it wasn't 1950 or even 1945, it was 1937, and he hadn't been able to bring any of them around. He had not yet anyway dared to ask Sally to commit, which might mean turning her back on her family, or having them turn their backs on her. It seemed horribly unfair, but to leave her dangling on the horns of his dilemma was unfair too. And so he had told her he was going to come up here, spend the weekend, and come to a decision. Either the firm on Commonwealth Avenue or the little wooden office behind the Curry Town Hall and next to the Sunoco, Boston or Curry, the Lady or the Tiger. And so far, he had decided. "Absolutely nothing," he muttered. "Gosh almighty." He was en route 111 now and headed back toward the lake. His stomach was talking to him about lunch, but it was going in low and rather respectful tones, as if it was also abashed by his inability to decide. His greatest wish was that he could make his father and mother understand that the firm was not right for him, that he would be a square peg in a round hole. The fact that the firm had been right for his father and grandfather, not to mention the Hon, Theodore Alberton, Esquire, and his father, did not make it right for him. He had tried in every way he could think of to express to them that he might be capable of doing perfectly adequate work at the double brownstone on Com Ave and still feel desperately unhappy there. Would that unhappiness seep into his home life? It could, and probably would. "Nonsense," his father had replied. "Once you get broken in, you'll love it. I did, and you will. A fresh challenge every day. No suits in small claims court over broken plows and stolen farm wagons." Broken in. What a phase. What a phrase. It had haunted him through all this spring and summer. It was what you did with horses. Broke them in. Worked them until they became nags, then shipped them off to the glue factory. He felt the metaphor, while melodramatic, so realistic. His mother, who at least sensed that his distress was real, true thing, was kinder. "You won't know if the firm is right for you until you've tried it," she said, and that was the most reasonable and seductive reasoning put forward to him in favor of the firm, because he knew himself. He had been a very good student of the law, not good enough to be brilliant perhaps, but there was no shame in being very good. He wasn't much of a rebel, though, and neither was Sally Ann. If they had been, they wouldn't have been so deeply distressed at the idea of going against the wishes of their parents. They weren't still teenagers, for gosh sake. If he went to work for the firm, Phil suspected he would find aspects of it challenging, and he suspected even more strongly that he would, in time, become broken in. His idea of being the first lawyer in a sleepy little town that might someday grow into an affluent large town, possibly even a small city, would recede. Slowly at first, then, as the first strands of gray appeared at his temples more quickly. In 5 years, it would seem more dream than desire. There would be children and a house to take care of, more hostages to fortune, and each year, how each month, each week, each gosh darn day, it would be more difficult to turn back. A lifetime, of course. He tried to imagine telling Sally Ann he had settled on Curry. His parents would help them get started, probably, even if the Albertons wouldn't. He had some savings, and so did Sal, not much. It would be hard, but not impossible, perhaps. He suspected Ted Alberton was wrong about his daughter refusing to marry without his blessing. Phil dared to believe he knew Sal better than her father did, in that respect, but what would a marriage lacking that blessing be like? Was it fair to either of them to start out with acrimony instead of support? So his mind swung back and forth, town or city, lady or tiger, as he breasted one of the long hills on Route 111. A bright yellow sign, hand-painted, caught his eye. 2 miles to the answer man, it read. Phil grinned, then laughed out loud. It would be nice if there really was such a guy, he thought. I could certainly use a few answers. He drove on and passed another sign soon enough. This one was electric blue. Answer man, 1 mile. Phil topped another long rise, and there at the bottom of the downgrade he saw a splash of bright red at the side of the road. As he drew closer, he saw it was a large beach umbrella with hanging scallop sides. There was a table beneath it. A man sat behind it, in the shade. Phil thought the setup looked like the lemonade stands you often passed in the summer. But those were hopeful little kids who had forgotten to add sugar to their puckery brew more often than not. And this wasn't summer but mid-autumn. More curious than ever, Phil pulled over and got out of his jalopy. Hello. Hello yourself, the answer man responded, equably enough. He looked to be about 50. His thinning hair was salt and pepper. His face was lined, but his eyes were bright and interested and unaided by specs. He wore a white shirt, plain gray slacks, and black shoes. His long-fingered hands were folded neatly on the surface of his table. A bag, like a doctor's satchel, rested by one foot. He looked like an intelligent fellow, and Phil got no sense of eccentricity about him. He in fact reminded Phil of the dozen or so mid-level and middle-aged lawyers in the firm. Solid, respectable men who lacked that final increment of ability, feeling of comfy corporate normality, which would propel them to partner level. It was that very feeling of comfy corporate normality that made the man's appearance here beneath a red umbrella sitting in the middle of nowhere in particular so curious. There was a folding wooden camp chair on the other side of the table. The client's chair, presumably. 3 little signs had been set up in a row to face the answer man's prospective customers. The answer man. Read the sign in the middle. $25 per 5 minutes. Read the sign on the left. Your first 2 answers free. Read the sign on the right. What is this exactly? Asked Phil. The answer man fixed him with a look that was ironic but not unfriendly. You look like a smart young man, he said. A young man who has been to college, judging by the pennant I see on your car aerial. Harvard, no less. 10,000 men of Harvard cry for victory today. Right, Phil said, smiling, for they know that over Eli, fair Harvard holds sway. The answer man smiled back. Such young fellows as yourself and girls are so used to asking questions that they don't even think about what they are asking. And since business has been slow this morning, I'm going to do you a favor of not answering that question, which still leaves you with 2 free ones if you want them. Phil thought that, even if the guy had a few screws loose, what he said made perfect sense. He had asked a question to which the answer was obvious. For $25, this man would answer questions for 5 minutes. That was what was going on here, and that was all. Well, say, don't you think 25 smackers for 5 minutes worth of answers is pretty steep? It's no wonder your biz has been on the slow side. Well, what is steep? No, don't answer that. You're not the answer man, I am. My rates vary according to my location. Excuse me. And my prospective customers. I've charged $100. Goodness. For 5 minutes, and on one storied occasion, I charged 1,000. 1,000 Ironmen. Yes, but I've also charged as little as a dime. You might say I charge what the traffic will bear. Answers aren't always painful, young man, but correct answers should never come cheap. Phil opened his mouth to ask if the guy was serious, then closed it again. He could easily imagine the answer man saying, "Yes, I am, and that's your second free question. How would I know the answers you gave me would be true and correct?" "You wouldn't now, but in course of time, you would," said the answer man. "And that's 2, Phil said. He was grinning wildly, enjoying the game. He said, "How much course of time are we talking about?" It was no sooner out than he clapped a hand over his mouth, but too late. "It's been slow today, so I'm going to give you a 3rd free one," the man behind the table said. "The answer, it varies, which helps you get to the truth of my profession. If it's the truth you're seeking, not at all. Do you see what I mean about how easy it is to ask questions that don't aid understanding? It devalues the whole process of asking, doesn't it? If delving into matters." Answer man leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers at the nape of his neck, and gazed at Phil. I shouldn't be surprised at how unhelpful the questions of smart people can be, having been in this business for as long as I have. Yet somehow I still am. It's loose. It's lazy. I have often wondered if smart people really understand what answers they seek in life. Perhaps they just cruise along on a magic carpet of ego, making assumptions that are often wrong. That's the only reason I can think of as to why they ask such impotent questions. Impotent, really. The answer man went on as if he hadn't heard. "You asked me how you'd know if my answers were the correct ones, true and correct, as how you put it, which was quite nice, so I gave you one for free. If this were the pre-Christmas rush, I would have seen you back into your car and down the road 2 minutes ago." Breeze gusted, flapping the scalloped edge of the red umbrella and ruffling the wings of the answer man's salt and pepper hair. He looked down the empty road with an expression of deep melancholy. "Fall is a slow time for me, and October is the slowest month of all. I think more people are able to find answers on their own in the autumn." He continued to look along the black ribbon of road winding its way into the blazing trees for a moment. Then his eyes cleared and he looked back at Phil again. "Why didn't you just ask me something specific?" Phil was caught by surprise. "I don't know what you mean." "What you really wanted to know is if I'm a fake," the answer man said. "And if you had asked me what your mother's maiden name was, for example, or the name of your 5th grade teacher, something I couldn't possibly know unless I am what I say I am, you could have found out. He shook his head. People without your intellectual advantages usually ask exactly that sort of question. People with them, people with a Harvard education, let us say, hardly ever do. It goes back to what I said. Smart people labor under a dual disadvantage. They don't know the answers they need, and they don't know what questions to ask. Education doesn't inculcate mental discipline. You'd think it would, but it's often just the opposite. Okay, Phil said, nettled. What is my mother's maiden name? Sorry, the answer man said, and tapped the sign that said $25 per 5 minutes. For that you need to pay. You crooked me, Phil exclaimed humorously. He didn't feel humorous, he felt exasperated with both of them. Not at all, the answer man replied equably. You crooked yourself. Phil was about to remonstrate, then didn't. He could see the man's point. This was a kind of intellectual 3-card Monty. It's been interesting, sir, but $25 is a little high for a fellow not long out of college and thinking of starting his own business. So I better get back on the road. It's been fun passing the time of day with you. As he started away, Phil thought, no, he was sure that the man sitting beneath the red umbrella would say, business being slow and all, maybe I could give you 5 minutes for $20. Hell, I'll make it 15. 15 simoleons, and you can set your mind to rest about all sorts of things. And when that happened, Phil decided he was going to pay right up and sit right down. The man was obviously a charlatan and a screw tip in the bargain, but what the hey? He had a 20, a 10, and 2 5s in his wallet. Even with a splurge here, that was more than enough to buy a tank of ethyl for the old jalopy, and a good lunch at a roadside restaurant. Phil thought that even hearing the questions spoken right out loud instead of just knocking around in his head might go a good way towards solving his problem. The self-styled answer man was right about one thing, Phil thought. Getting good answers was mostly a matter of asking good questions. But all the answer man said was, you drive safe now. Phil walked to his car, crossed around the slightly dented front fender, and looked back. He still expected the answer man to offer him a cut rate, but the answer man seemed to have dismissed Phil entirely. He was looking over toward Vermont, humming and using a small twig to clean beneath his nails. He intends to let me go, Phil thought, nettled all over again. Well, be damned to him. That's just what I'm going to do. He opened the driver's door of his Chevy, hesitated, then closed it again. He took out his wallet. He removed the 20 and one of the 5s. Just hearing the questions out loud, he thought again, and I don't have to tell anyone that I stopped to pay a fortune teller during a depression. Also, it might be worth $25 just to see the smug son of a buck groping around and making excuses when Phil did ask him for his mother's maiden name. Change your mind? The answer man tucked his nail-cleaning twig into the breast pocket of his shirt and picked up his satchel. Phil smiled and held out his money. For the next 5 minutes, I'm the one asking the questions. The man laughed and pointed a finger at Phil. Good one, my friend. I like you. But before I take your money, there's one rule we need to get straight. Oh, here it comes, Phil thought. The hole he intends to wriggle through. From his bag, the answer man removed what looked like an old-fashioned Big Ben alarm clock. When he set it on the table, Phil saw it was actually a giant-sized stopwatch, with numbers running from 5 to 0. I am not a psychiatrist or a counselor, nor am I a fortune teller, although I'm sure that's what you're thinking. Here's the point. Don't try asking me any questions with should I in them. No should I this, no should I that. I answer questions, but I'm not going to solve your problems. Phil, who had planned to ask the fellow if he should join the firm or open his own office in Curry, started to pull back his money. Then he thought, if I can't couch my questions in a way that skirts his should I prohibition, what kind of courtroom lawyer will I make? I'm in, Phil said, and handed over his money. Into the answer man's bag it went. I can't keep calling you son. Perhaps you'll give me your name. Phil. Phil what? Phil smiled craftily. Just Phil. I think it's all you need, considering we are not going to be together long. All right, just Phil. Give me a sec to wind this sucker up, and I see you're wearing your own timepiece. Looks like a very fine Lova, so if you care to check it against mine, feel free. Oh, I will, Phil said. I intend to get my money's worth. And so you shall. The answer man wound his oversized stopwatch with a clackety-clack sound very similar to the clock Phil had kept by his bedside during his undergraduate years. Are you ready? Yes. Phil sat down in the client's chair. But if you can't answer my first question, I'll have my money back double quick. You'll either give it to me willingly or I'll take it by force. That sounds positively brutal, the answer man said, but he laughed when he said it. I'll ask again. Are you ready? Yes. So we begin. The answer man clicked a lever on the back of his clock and it began to tick. Your suggestion. What's my mother's maiden name? The answer man didn't hesitate. Sporan. Phil's mouth dropped open. How in the hell do you know that? I don't want to waste time you've paid for, Phil, but I have to point out that you've asked another question to which you know the answer. I know because I am, ta-da, the answer man. Phil felt like he had been tagged by a right hook. He actually shook his head to clear it. The ticking of the answer man's big stopwatch was very loud. The hand was approaching the 4. What's my girl's name? Sally Ann Alberton. No hesitation at all. Phil began to be afraid. He told himself not to be. It was a fine October day, and he was both younger and no doubt stronger than the man on the other side of the table. Must be a trick, had to be. But that didn't make any less eeriness of it. Tempus is beginning, Phil. He shook his head again. Okay, I'm trying to decide if I should. The answer man wagged a finger at him. What did I tell you about that word? Phil tried to put his thoughts in order. Mock court, he thought. Think of it as mock court. He's the judge. There's been an objection to your line of questioning. How do you get around it? Can you answer questions about future events? The answer man rolled his eyes. We've already established that, have we not? I said you'd know if my answers were true and correct in the course of time. Such an answer presupposes knowledge of the future. For me, there is no future and no past. Everything is happening now. What old lady seance bullshit, Phil thought. Meanwhile, the black hand on the big stopwatch was almost to 3. Will Sally Ann agree to marry me when I propose? Yes. Will we live in Curry, the town down the road? Yes. The big black hand on the stopwatch reached 3, then passed it. Will we be happy? A broad question, and one to which you should also know the answer even to your young age. There will be ups, there will be downs, there will be agreements, and there will be arguments, but on measure, yes, the 2 of you will be happy. He somehow knew my mother's maiden name, Phil thought, and Sally's. The rest is just corny fortune-teller guesswork, but why? For a measly $25. Tempus still forgets, said the answer man. The ticking of the oversized stopwatch seemed louder than ever. The hand was past 3 and closing the gap on 2. Phil had no sane reason to be relieved by that answer the answer man was telling him, because it was what he wanted to hear, wasn't it? And hadn't he already made his decision about Curry? Wasn't all that horns of a dilemma? Stuff so much self-dramatization? And as for Sal, didn't he pretty much know she would marry him even if he did make moving to rural New Hampshire part of the deal? Not for absolute sure, not 100%, but 90%. Abruptly he changed direction. Tell me where my father was born, if you can. Again, the answer man did not hesitate. He was actually born while at sea on a ship called the Mary Bell. Phil again felt like he had been socked in the jaw. It was an old family story which treasured and often told. Grandfather and grandmother had been returning to America after a pilgrimage to London. where their parents had been born and lived their early lives. Graham had insisted on making the trip even though she was 8 months pregnant by the time they returned. There was a storm. Grandmother's seasickness was so violent it triggered her labor. There was a doctor on board, and he delivered the infant. No one expected baby John to live, but wrapped in cotton, batting and fed from an eyedropper he had. And thus Philip Yeager Parker, Harvard Law School graduate, became possible. He started to ask again how the man on the other side of the table, hands still neatly folded, could know such a thing, then didn't. The reply would be the same, because I am the answer man. Questions crammed in his mind like a panicked crowd trying to escape a burning building. The stopwatch hand reached to and past it. The ticking seemed louder than ever. The answer men waited, hands folded. Will Curry prosper the way I think it will? Phil blurted. Yes. What else? What else? Sally's father and her mother, I suppose. Will they come around to us? Yes, in time. How long? The answer man seemed to calculate briefly as the single hand on the clock reached 1. He said, 7 years. Phil's heart sank. 7 years was a lifetime. He could tell himself the answer man had plucked that number out of thin air, but he no longer believed it. Your time grows short. Just Phil. He could see that for himself, but he couldn't think of another question except, how long will I live? And concomitant question, how long will Sally Ann live? Did he want to know either of those things? He did not. But he didn't want to waste his remaining 40 or 50 seconds, so he asked the only thing that came to mind. My father says there's going to be a war. I say there won't. Which of us is right? He is. Will America be in it? Yes. How long before we're in it? 4 years and 2 months. He was down to 20 seconds now, maybe a little more. Will I be in it? Yes. Will I be hurt? No. But that wasn't the right question. It left a loophole. Will I be killed? The big stopwatch reached 0 and went off with bring sound. The answer man silenced it. You asked that question just before the alarm, so I'll answer. No, just Phil, you will not be killed. Phil sat back in his chair and let out a breath. I don't know how you did it, sir, but it was very intense. I have to believe it was a shuck and jive. You must have known I was coming, got some background, but you certainly earned your 25 smacks. The answer man only smiled, but I didn't know exactly where I was going or what road I was going to take, so how could you? No reply, of course not. His 5 minutes were up. You know what? I feel weird, Swimmy. The world seemed to be going away. The answer man was still sitting at his table, but he appeared to be withdrawing, as if on rails. Grayness began to encroach on Phil's field of vision. He raised his hands to his eyes to clear them, and gray became black. Well, on that note, boys and girls, we are going to go to our first music break. On this music break, we have King Cinnamon from Biafra, Nigeria, and he's going to be singing Fantastic and Ala Imo Adarella. We have Mr. Hosni Bronx, hailing from Jamaica, as well as the Bronx of New York, with Dance as a Lion. And we have Nonye Toria from Ghana, South Africa, with Paper Loving, featuring Chris. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
We swap on the beat. Like the water bam bam. King Cinnamon. Oh shit, baddest. Take your bam bam anywhere you day. Play your bam bam, it is a Friday. Come on, let's ball, it is a holiday. Anything you want, baby, I will pay. Take your bam bam anywhere you day. Play your bam bam, it is a Friday. Come on, let's go, it is a holiday. Anything you want, baby, I will pay. Fantastic. Baby girl, you romantic. Fantastic. Baby girl, you romantic. better, baby, gather something. Come on closer, baby, gather 19. I know you better, but I am the king. Your backside bigger than Bombay. Baby girl, broncotum. I like the way you wind your broncotum. Baby girl, broncotum. I like the way you wind your broncotum. Jamaica, Ghana, shout out to the ladies in Asia, Nigeria, South Africa. Say me love you. Please me, baby. Yeah. Turn up from you. Shake your bum bum anywhere you day. Play your bum bum if it's a Friday. Come on, let's go, it is a holiday. Anything you want, baby, I will pay. Shake your bum bum anywhere you day. Play your bum bum if it's a Friday. Come on, let's go, it is a holiday. Anything you want, baby, I will pay. Fantastic. Baby girl, you romantic. Give me love. Me want you, me love you. Give me love. Oh, give me love. Hey, please me, baby. Yeah, turn up from you. Yeah, take your bum bum anywhere you day. Play your bum bum, it is a Friday. Come on, let's go, it is a holiday. Anything you want, baby, I will pay. Shake your bum bum anywhere you day. Play your bum bum, it is a Friday. Come on, let's go, it is a holiday. Anything you want, baby, I will pay. Fantastic. Baby girl, you romantic. Fantastic. Baby girl, you romantic.
Up on the beat.
Kanyi kele Chineke makwa na limo mbunde njem ọnụ. Kanyi kele onye nwụwa imakwa na limo mbunde njem ọnụ. Alimo, Alime Kerelo, Alimo, Alime Kerelo, Alimo State, Alime Kerelo, Alimo, Alime Kerelo, Alimo State, Alime Kerelo, Alimo, Alime Kerelo, Democracy Merielo, Ndime Merielo, Alimo, Alime Kerelo, Alimo, Alime Kerelo, Alimo State, Alime Kerelo, Alimo, Alime Kerelo, Democracy Merielo, Ndime Merielo, Elega Marama, Ebere Marama, Ovana Marama, Yes Lady Marama, Her Excellency, Emeka Edio Hama, Emeka Edio Hama, Omenka Unanya Nidio Hama, Omenka Unanya Wa, Emeka Neki Modima, Emeka Modimao, Emeka puta no boy. Oh yeah. Wa wulelo. Emeka puta no boy. Woko madima. We me posto. Emeka Meki Modimao. Emeka Meki Modimao. Ndem jejemba. Mwan jejemba. Ndem jemano. Deputy Governor Mostate Chilike. Gerard Ronna Ikaraka, Wokoma Dima, Porabo, Deputy Governor Willie Deregima, Alukuta Deregima, Alimo State Deregima, Ala Nigeria Maragima, Onya Jemonu, Standing Wamuche Karaka, Stanley Onya Babamba, President Good Life Foundation, Shirike, President General, Senate Group of Companies, President General, Financial Mata Karaka, Alo Were Diregima, Alambise Diregima, Alimo State Diregima, Ala Nigeria Maragima, Onya Jemano, Franklin Neti Shiriko, Nebe Arabido Hotels, ABC Transport Karaka, Alo Were Diregima, Alambise Diregima, Alimo State Diregima, Ala Nigeria Maragima, Uchonya go chande, Honorable Wokoma Dima, Onye Horo Nyakele Yao, Mawugi, Ginando Tugio, Mawunule, Njigari Chinala, Imo State, Mawugi, Ginando Tugio, Mawunule, Minigari Zonala, Imo State, Alo Were Deregima, Alo Were Deregima, Alimo State Deregima, Ala Nigeria Maragima, the chairman, Orange Drugs Limited, Jisa Anthony Ifani Chubundu Business and Ishirike, Ikenga Chele, pride of his people, most outstanding one, Okoma Marama, Iborabo, Alo Were Deregima, Alijato Deregima, Alimo State Deregima, Ala Nigeria Maragima, Honorable Jobagu Shirike, Honorable Bina Shirike, Jera Labosa Shirike, Tochuko Kereke Shirike, Okahu Beshirike, Intina Benina Shirike, Onyamana Construction, Wokoma Dima Ikaraka, Onya Shiwara Heborani, Detebu Imarama, Wokoma de Jembo, Wokoma Dima Ikaraka, Wiz Popule, Ibo Felamo, Onyamana Pito, Akana Kumpa, Ikaraka, Eziwa Mama, Mr. Ludiriwa, Wokome de Jemba, CEO Elizabeth Ventures, Ikaraka, Democracy Merielo, Ndime Merielo. Democracy Merielo, Ndime Merielo, Alime Gerelo, Alime Gerelo. Thank God I'm from Imo State. Emeka has come to rejuvenate. Imo State, make you jubilate, make you celebrate. Emeka Shikwen Mpise, them say, Emeka has come to rejuvenate. Imo State, celebrate, make we jubilate. Ala mekele His Excellency Achikudenwa. Mekele kwa His Excellency Dr. Hakim. Yemaka Right Honorable BDK. Mekele kwa Right Honorable Jones Oyereri. Ala mekele Senator Onyebuchi Mr. Empowerment. Mekele kwa Right Honorable Emeka Chinedu. Umo mimo lowali bia meziena limo. Alima de lama.
Cliffito.
She know. She know me treat her better than her man. But she a worry about the millions. You love me for true, but certain things in life I say you want to do. Ay. So you say me need to understand that you are made for a money man. But if you can't love me now, don't love me later. When my later is much greater, it only proves that you love the paper, my paper.
Boy, me gon' love you now, me gon' love you later. When your later is much greater. Cause me a one-man trafficator. Yeah. They say I love him, but I love you more. He took me shopping sprees and bought me finer, but I crown it more. You're the one that gave me proper loving. Him, I have all the money. Everything to satisfy me vanity, but in my heart I knew you were the only one that I would be loving from now till the end of time.
Don't love me later. When my later is much greater, it only proves that you love the paper, my paper.
Boy, me gon' love you now, me gon' love you later. When your later is much greater. Cause me a one-man trafficator. Yeah.
Girl, I know you want stability, but that no mean say you fi sell your soul for vanity, no. Bright lights, fast cars at the city, and the fast lane make you lose your sanity. But me can't believe you sell yourself so short. Forget the money you will make, man, break your parts. But a your life make your choice because me now make you break my heart, no. If you can't love me now, don't love me later. When my later is much greater, it only proves that you love the paper, my paper.
Boy, me gon' love you now, me gon' love you later. When your later is much greater. Cause me a one-man trafficator. Yeah.
If you can't love me now, don't love me later. When my later is much greater, it only proves that you love the paper, my paper.
Boy, me gon' love you now, me gon' love you later. When your later is much greater. Cause me a one-man trafficator.
I wanted to learn the hard way, so I'm taking you to lover school. You want money just for party, girl. You take me for fool.
Every piece of my heart I gave away. I gave it away to you. Why don't you understand, babe? What I feel for you is true. So
If you can't love me now, don't love me later. When my later is much greater, it only proves that you love the paper, my paper.
boy, me gon' love you now, me gon' love you later. When your later is much greater. Cause me a one-man trafficator. Yeah. Now, trafficator. Yeah.
Welcome back, and thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Tonight we are reading Stephen King's book, You Like It Darker, Stories. When Phil came to, he was behind the wheel of his Chevrolet, parked on the shoulder of Route 111. His watch said it was 1:20. I passed out, first time in my life. Don't they say there's a first time for everything? Passed out, yes, pulled over first, thank God, and turned off the engine. Probably from hunger. He'd had 6 bottles of beer on Friday night, and he supposed there were calories and at least some nourishment in beer, but he hadn't had much to eat yesterday or today, so it made a degree of sense. But when you passed out, as opposed to being asleep, did you have dreams? Because he'd had a doozy. He could remember every detail. The scallop red umbrella, the big stopwatch, or maybe you called that sort of thing a stop clock, the answer man's salt and pepper hair. He could remember every question and every answer. It was no dream. Yes, he said aloud. Yes, it was. Had to be. He knew Mother's maiden name and where Father was born in the dream because I knew those things. He got out of his car and walked slowly to where the answer man had been. The table was gone, the chairs were gone, but he could see marks in the soft earth where they had been. The grayness started to come back, and he slapped himself hard, first on one cheek and then on the other. Then he kicked at the dirt until the marks were gone. This never happened, he told the empty road and the blazing trees. He said it again. This never happened. He got back behind the wheel, started his engine, and pulled onto the highway. He decided he wouldn't tell Sally Ann about passing out. It would worry her, and she would probably insist that he see a doctor. It was just hunger, that was all. Hunger in the most vivid dream he'd ever had. 2 hamburgers and a Coca-Cola and a piece of apple pie would put him right, and he was pretty sure there was a greasy spoon in Ossipee, not 5 miles down the road. One thing had come from his odd roadside fugue. No, actually 2 things. He would tell her he meant to hang out his shingle in the little town of Curry. She would still give him her hand in marriage? Parents be damned. Phil Parker and Sally Ann Alberton were married in Boston's Old South Church on April 29, 1938. Ted Alberton walked his daughter down the aisle. This walk, which he had first refused to make, was a result of his wife's diplomacy and his daughter's gentle supplications. Once he was able to think about Sal's impending nuptials calmly, Mr. Alberton realized there was another reason to make the short walk: business. John Parker was a senior partner in the firm. Ted heartily disapproved of Phil's decision to throw away a bright future in a hick farming community, but there was the firm to think of. In the years ahead, there must be no friction between the partners, so he did his duty, but he did it with a set, unsmiling face. As he watched the ceremony, 2 old sayings came to Ted Alberton's mind. Youth must be served as one. Marry in haste, repent at leisure was the other. There was no honeymoon. Phil's parents had reluctantly opened his trust fund $30,000, and he was anxious not to waste it. A week after the ceremony, he opened the little office next to Sunoco Station. The sign on the door, painted by his new bride, read, Philip Y. Parker, attorney at law. On his desk was a telephone and an appointment book full of blank pages. They did not stay blank for long. On the very afternoon he opened for business, a farmer named Regis Toomey walked in. He was wearing bib overalls and a straw hat. He was everything Phil's father had predicted. Toomey offered to take off his muddy boots, and Phil told him not to bother. I'm thinking you came by that mud honorably. Sit down and tell me why you're here. Toomey sat. He took off his straw hat and placed it on his lap. How much do you charge? It came out Yankee. Charge. 50% of what I get for you. If I get nothing, $25. He hadn't forgot the answer man's little sign, and he, Phil, hoped to answer questions for all sorts of people, starting with this man. Sounds fair, said Toomey. Here's what. The bank wants to foreclose me and auction off the farm. But I've got a paper. He bought it, out from the front pocket of his bibballs and passed it across the desk. Says I've got 90 days grace. Bank fella says that's null and void if I didn't make the last payment. Did you? All but $10. The wife went grocerying, don't you see, and that left me short. Phil could hardly believe it. Are you saying the bank wants to take your farm because of $10 shortfall? Bank fella says so. Says they can auction it off, but I'm guessing they already have a buyer lined up. We'll see about that, Phil said. I don't have $25 just about now, Lawyer Parker. Sally Ann came out of the other room with a pot of coffee. She was wearing a dark blue dress and a pinafore of a slightly lighter shade. Her face free of makeup shone, her blonde hair was pulled back. Tommy was struck dumb. We'll take care of your case, Mr. Toomey, she said. And because it's our first no charge no matter the outcome, isn't that right, Philip? Absolutely, Phil said, although he had been looking forward to that $25. What's the bank fella's name? Mr. Lathrop, Toomey said, and grimaced like a man who's bitten into something sour. First Bank. He's the chief loan officer, and in charge of mortgages. Phil presented himself at the First Bank of New Hampshire that very afternoon and inquired of Mr. Lathrop if his bosses would enjoy a story in the union leader about a cruel bank that took a farmer's property in the depths of a depression over a measly $10. After discussion, some of it fairly warm, Mr. Lathrop saw the light. I'm tempted to take you to court anyway, Phil said pleasantly. Unfair business practices, pain and suffering, financial deception. That's outrageous, Mr. Lathrop said. You'd never win. Perhaps not, but the bank would lose either way. I think $500 paid into Mr. Toomey's account would close this matter to a mutual satisfaction of both parties. Lathrop groused, but the money was paid. Toomey offered to fork over half, but Phil, with Sally Ann's concurrence, refused. He did take $25 when Toomey insisted, thinking of the answer man as he did it. The news spread both in Curry and the surrounding towns. Phil discovered several banks were using the same short payment fiddle to foreclose on farms. In one case, a farmer in neighboring Hancock came up $20 short 3 months before his mortgage would have been paid off. His farm was foreclosed and then sold to a construction company for $12,000. Phil took that one to court and got $8,000 back for the farmer. Not full value, but better than nothing, and the press coverage was gold. By 1939, his little office had been refurbished, new shingles and a fresh coat of paint. Like Sally Ann's face, it shone. When the Sunoco station went bust, Phil bought it and added an associate just out of law school. Sally Ann picked out a secretary, smart but elderly and plain, who doubled as a receptionist to help him winnow his cases. By 1941, his business was in the black. The future looked bright. Then 4 years and 2 months after Phil's encounter with the man sitting under a red umbrella by the side of the road, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Not long before their wedding, Sally Ann Alberton took Phil by the hand and led him out onto the back lawn of the Alberton house in Wellesley. They sat on a bench by the goldfish pond, where a skim of ice had melted only recently. Her color was high, and she wouldn't look him in the face, but she was determined to say what was on her mind. Phil thought that on that afternoon she had never looked more like her father. You need to lay in a supply of French letters, she said, looking fixedly down at her linked hands. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yes, Phil said. He had also heard them called English caps and, as an undergrad, naughty bags. He had worn such a thing exactly once on a trip to a house of ill repute in Providence. It was an expedition that still filled him with shame. But why? Don't you want Children? Of course I want children, but not until I'm sure I won't have to come begging to my parents or you to yours to help us out. My father would love that, and he'd put conditions on it. Strings to draw you away from what you really want to do, and I can't have that. I won't have that. She snatched a quick glance at him, reading his emotional temperature, then looked back down at their linked hands again. There's a thing for women, it's called a diaphragm, but if I ask Dr. Grayson, he'll tell my parents. A doctor is enjoined from such behavior, Phil said. He would do it just the same, so French letters, do you agree? He thought about asking her how she even knew about such things and decided he didn't want to know. Some questions should not be answered. I agree. Now she did look at him, and you must buy them in Portland or Freiburg or North Conway, far from Curry, because people talk. Phil burst out laughing. You are a sly one. I am when I have to be, she said. His business prospered, and several times he and Sally Ann discussed throwing the French letters away, but in those first years, Phil was working farmer's hours, dawn to dusk, often in court, often on the road, and the idea of adding a kitty seemed more like a burden than a blessing. Then, December 7th. I'm going to enlist, he told Sally Ann that night. They had been listening to the radio all day. You could get a deferment, you know. You're almost 30. I don't want a deferment. No, she said, and took his hand. Of course you don't. If you did, I'd love you less. Those dirty, sneaking Japs. Also what? Her answer made him realize, as with the business about buying his French letters far from Curry, just how much her father's child she was. As it would look bad, business would suffer. You might be called a coward. Just come back to me, Phil. Promise. Phil remembered what the answer man had told him under the red umbrella that day in October. Not killed, not injured. He had no business believing such a thing, not all these years later, but he did. I promise, I absolutely do. She put her arms around his neck, then come to bed, and never mind the damn rubber. I want to feel you in me. 9 weeks later, Phil sat in a Paris Island Quonset hut, sweating and aching in every muscle. He was reading a letter from Sally Ann. She was pregnant. Paris Island, man, that place, I tell you what. On the morning of February 18th, 1944, Lieutenant Philip Parker led his contingent of the 22nd Marines ashore on the atoll in Inuiatuk. The Navy had subjected the Japanese to 3 days of bombardment, and intelligence said the enemy forces were thin on the ground. Unlike most of naval intelligence, this turned out to be true. On the other hand, nobody had bothered to tell the Gyrenes about the steep sand dunes they would have to climb after the Higgins boats grounded. The Japs were waiting for them, but they were armed with rifles instead of the dreaded Nambu light machine guns. Phil lost 6 of his 36, 2 killed and 4 wounded, only 1 seriously. By the time they reached the top of the dunes, the Japs had melted into the thick brush. The 22nd Marines swept west, meeting only scattered resistance. One of Phil's men was shot in the shoulder, another fell into a hole and broke his leg. Those were his only casualties after the landing. Walk in the park, Sergeant Myers said. When they reached the ocean on the far side of the atoll, Phil got a walkie-talkie message from the Jackleg Marine HQ that had been set up on the other side of the dunes that had caused them the worst casualties. They could still hear scattered fire from the south, but that was dying out even as they ate a noon meal. A picnic lunch at the seashore, Phil thought. Who knew war could be so pleasant? What's the word, Loot? Myers asked when Phil holstered the walkie. Johnny Walker says the island is secure, Phil said. He was speaking of Colonel John T. Walker, who is bossing this little farrago along with his fellow colonel, Russell Ayers. Don't sound secure, said Private First Class Milwaukee. He nodded toward the south, but by 1500, the shooting had fizzled away to nothing. Phil waited for orders, got none, posted 3 guards at the edge of the overgrowth, and told the rest of the men they could fall out until further notice. At 2000 hours, they were told to pack up and head back east, where they would reconnect with the main landing force. There was a grumbling about having to trek back through the thick underbrush when it would soon be dark, but orders was orders, and they saddled up. After Private Franklin broke his leg in another hole and Private Gordon nearly put out an eye running into a tree, Phil radioed HQ and asked permission to camp for the night because the terrain was difficult. "Fucking difficult is right," said Private First Class Milwaukee. Permission was granted. They camped under their netting, but plenty of mosquitoes still got in. "At least the ground's dry," Myers said. "I've had trench foot, and it's not for sissies." Phil fell asleep to the sound of his men slapping and Private Franklin, he with the broken leg, moaning. He awoke just before dawn, aware that shapes were moving north of their little encampment through the gloom. Hundreds of shapes. He found out later that Innewetak was riddled with spider holes. Franklin had probably broken his leg in one of them. A Japanese infantryman might have been at the bottom looking up as Wrangel and Sergeant Myers pulled him out of it. Myers now put a hand on Phil's shoulder and murmured, "Not a word, not a sound. They might miss us, I think." That was when one of the Marines coughed. Conflicting lights crisscrossed the gray morning grayer still under the canopy, and picked out the hump shape swaddled in mosquito netting. Firing began. 6 Marines were slaughtered in their sleep. 8 more were wounded. Only 1 Marine got off a shot. Myers had his arm around Phil. Phil had an arm around Myers. They listened to bullets whicker overhead, and several thumped the ground around them. Then there was a harsh command in Japanese. "Zinpo! Zimpo!" it sounded like, and the Nips moved on, running and crashing through the brush. "They're counterattacking," Phil said. "That's the only reason I could think of why they didn't finish us off." "HQ being their objective?" Myers asked. "Gotta be. Come on. You, me, anybody else who's not wounded." "You're crazy," Myers said. His teeth shone as his lips parted in a grin. "I like it." Phil counted only 6 men who chased after the Japanese. There might have been 1 or 2 more. Now the firing started up again ahead of them. First sporadic, then constant. Grenades crumped, and Phil heard the chatter of the dreaded Nambu. It was joined by other machine guns. 3, 4. The remaining Marines and Phil's contingent burst out of the overgrowth and saw the far side of the dunes that had given them so much trouble the day before. It was covered with Japanese soldiers headed for the lightly defended HQ, but Phil's men were behind them. A portly Jap, perhaps the only overweight Jap in the whole army, Phil thought later, had fallen slightly behind his comrades. He was carrying a Nambu light machine gun, and was festooned with belts of ammunition. Slightly overhead him was another, thinner machine gunner. Phil drew his knife and ran at the portly soldier, feeling that if he could get that machine gun, he could do a fair amount of damage. Maybe a lot. He plunged the knife into the nape of the Jap's neck. It was his first kill, but in the heat of the moment that hardly registered. The Jap shrieked and fell forward. The skinny machine gunner ahead of him turned, raising his weapon. "Oot! Drop! Drop!" Myers screamed. Phil didn't, because in that moment he thought of the answer man. "Will I be hurt?" he had asked. The answer man said no, but then Phil realized he'd asked the wrong question. He had asked the right one just before his 5 minutes ran out. "Will I be killed?" And the answer, no. Just Phil, "You will not be killed." In that moment, on Innewetak, he believed it. Perhaps because the answer man had known his mother's maiden name and where his father had been born. Perhaps because he had no other choice. The skinny Jap opened fire with his Nambu. Phil was aware of Myers staggering backward in a spray of blood. Destry and Milwaukee fell on either side of him. He heard bullets whip by on both sides of his head. He was aware of tugs at his pants and shirt, as if he were being nipped by a playful puppy. He would later count over a dozen holes in his clothing, but not a single bullet hit him or even grazed him. He opened fire, raking the appropriate Nambu from left to right, knocking down Japanese soldiers like Kibi dolls. Others turned momentarily, shocked to stillness by this unexpected attack from their rear, then opened fire. Bullets struck the sand in front of Phil, covering the toes of his boots. More ripped at his clothes. He was aware at least 2 of his men were firing back. He pulled another ammo belt from the dead Jap at his feet and opened fire again, unaware of the 20-pound weight of the Nambu, unaware that it was heating up, unaware that he was screaming. Now the Americans were returning fire from the other side of the dune. Phil could tell by the sound of the carbines. They advanced, still fired. He walked over dead Jap soldiers. The Nambu jammed. He threw it aside, bent, and a bullet winged his helmet off his head and sent it flying. Phil hardly noticed. He picked up another machine gun and began firing again. He became aware that Myers was beside him again, half of his face awash with blood, a piece of his scalp dangling and swinging as he walked. "You sons of bitches," he screamed. "Yeah, you sons of bitches, welcome to America." That was so crazy Phil began to laugh. He was still laughing when they crested the dune. He threw the Nambu aside and raised both arms. "Marines! Marines, don't shoot! Marines!" The counterattack, such as it was, ended. Sergeant Rick Myers was awarded a Silver Star. He said he would rather have had his right eye back. Lieutenant Philip Parker was one of the 473 Medal of Honor recipients during the Second World War, and although unwounded, his war was over. A photographer took a picture of his bullet-riddled shirt with the sun shining through the holes, and it made all the papers back home in what combat Marines called the world. He was an authentic hero and would spend the rest of his service in America making speeches and selling war bonds. Ted Alberton embraced him and called him a warrior. Called him son. Phil thought, this man is ridiculous, but he hugged back willingly enough, knowing when a hatchet was being buried. He met his son, now nearly 3 years old. Sometimes at night, lying wakeful beside his sleeping wife, Phil thought of the skinny Japanese soldier, the one who had heard his compatriots' dying scream. He saw the skinny soldier turn. He saw the skinny soldier's wide brown eyes beneath his field cap, the scar in the shape of a fish hook beside one of them, something the skinny soldier might have gotten as a child. He saw the skinny soldier open fire. He remembered the sound of the bullets made as they whispered around him. He thought of how some of those passing slugs had tugged playfully at his clothes as if they weren't pellets of death, or worse, bringers of lifelong injury. He thought of how sure he'd been of his survival because of the Answer Man's, call it what it was, his prophecy. And on those nights he wondered if the man under the red umbrella had seen the future, or made it. To this question, Phil found no answer. 2. On his war bonds rounds, which consisted of speaking engagements in the New England states and sometimes New York as well, Phil had the chance to talk with many soldiers who had served and heard many stories of difficult homecomings. One ex-Marine put it very succinctly. At first, after 4 years apart, we were strangers sleeping together. Phil and Sally Ann were spared this awkward phase, probably because they had grown up together from childhood. The physical love between them came naturally. Once at the moment of their mutual climax, Sally Ann said, "Oh, my hero!" and they both collapsed with the giggles. Jacob was shy of him at first, clinging to his mother and looking with fearful eyes at the tall man who had come into their lives. When Phil tried to hold him, the boy struggled to be put down, sometimes crying. He would toddle to his mother, grasp her leg, and stare at the stranger he was supposed to call Daddy. One evening, while Jake was sitting between his mother's feet and playing with his blocks, Phil sat down across from him and rolled him a tennis ball. He expected nothing and was delighted when Jake rolled it back. Back and forth went the ball. Sally Ann put down her book to watch. Phil gave the ball a low bounce. Jake put out his hands and caught it. When Phil laughed, Jake laughed with him. After that, it was all right between them. Better than all right. Phil loved everything about his son. His blue eyes, his fine brown hair, his sturdy body. Most of all, he loved the little boy's potential. He couldn't see the man Jake might become and didn't want to. Let it be a surprise, he thought. There came an evening late in that year of 1944 when Jake refused to let Sal pick him up and carry him to bed. "Want Daddy," he said. It might not have been the best night of Phil's life, but he couldn't think of a better one. Will Curry prosper the way? I think it will. He'd asked on that long ago, day that seemed like a dream, although he still remembered each question asked and each reply given. The answer man had told him it would, and he was right about that as well, partly because of his fame as a Medal of Honor winning Marine, but mostly because he asked a fair price for his services and because he was good at his job. "A clever bastard," the locals said. Phil Parker had more clients than he could handle in the years after the war. The associate he'd added in 1939 was killed in a bombing raid over Hamburg, so Phil added a new fella, then a second, then, at Sal's urging, a young woman. That caused some disgruntled talk among Curry's old Yankees, but by 1950 there were new people in town with new ideas and new money. Shopping center was built in the neighborhood, town of Patton. Phil and his associates did the legal work and made a good profit. In Curry, the 5-room grammar was replaced by a spanking new 8-room elementary school. Phil bought the old building for a song and it became his new office. Phil Parker and Associates. The Albertons came often to visit with their daughter, their grandson, and of course with the war hero. Phil was quite sure Ted had come to believe he had always supported his son-in-law's prescient decision to move to Curry, which was booming. Phil was able to put aside any old animosity he might have held on to concerning his father-in-law because of Ted's fierce and unconditional love for Jake. On the boy's 6th birthday, Ted gave him a little baseball glove and played underhanded toss with the boy in the backyard until it was almost too dark to see, and Sally Ann had to tell them both to come in and eat supper. No matter the press of work, Phil always tried to get home before dark in order to have a catch with his son. By the time Jake was 8, they were standing 30 feet apart, then 40, and throwing overhand. "Bring it, Dad!" Jake would cry. "Really steam it in!" Phil wouldn't throw even close to as hard as he could have, not to a boy of 8, but he increased the speed of his throws little by little. On spring and summer weekends, the two of them would sit together listening to the Red Sox on the radio. Sometimes all three of them. One November day, after they had been out throwing the baseball in 2 inches of snow, Sally Ann took Phil aside. "Did you play ball as a kid? Because I don't remember that you did." Phil shook his head. "Pickup games after school sometimes, but not often. I could field, but I couldn't hit worth a damn. The guys used to call me Whiffer Parker." "I never played sports either, but Jake, is he good, or is it just my imagination and a mother's pride?" "He's good. I can't wait to take him to his first Sox game." That happened in 1950. They sat in the bleachers, Phil on one side, Ted on the other, the boy between them, staring at the green outfield grass of Fenway Park. eyes wide, mouth agape, his bag of popcorn forgotten on his lap. Ted leaned over and said, "Someday, maybe, you'll be out there, Jake." Jake looked up at his granddad and smiled. "I know I will," he said. On an unseasonably warm October day in 1951, Phil visited the New Western Auto Store in North Conway and drove back home along Route 111 with a present for the whole family in the trunk. A Zenith television set, the Regent model with the porthole screen. He also bought rabbit ears, but with an antenna, they might be able to get the Boston stations. He was thinking Jake would go out of his mind with happiness at the prospect of actually watching Range Rider instead of listening to it on the radio. There was something else on his mind as well, potentially more important than the new TV. He'd had a conversation that morning with a man named Blaylock Atherton, who happened to be the Republican in charge of the New Hampshire State Senate. A real mover and shaker was Senator Atherton, and it had been an interesting conversation indeed. Phil was thinking of the discussion he'd have with Sally Ann about that when he passed a bright yellow sign planted on a stick by the side of the road. The message, 2 miles to the answer man, brought back brilliant memories. Can't be him, not after all these years, Phil thought, but in his heart he knew it was. Just past the Currytown line, he passed another sign, this one in electric blue, announcing that the answer man was a mile ahead. Phil breasted the hill at the edge of town. 200 yards ahead, he saw the red umbrella. This time the answer man had set up shop in a large clearing not far from the new elementary school. It was where the Curry Volunteer Fire Station would stand in a year or so. Heart thumping, new TV, and Blaylock Atherton forgotten, Phil pulled off the road and got out. His Chevrolet Jalopy was long gone. He slammed the door of his new Buick and for a moment just stood there, amazed by what he saw. More like thunderstruck. Phil had aged. The answer man hadn't. He looked exactly the same as he had on that October day 14 years ago. His thinning hair was no thinner now. His eyes were the same bright blue. White shirt, gray slacks, black shoes, all just as before. His long-fingered hands were folded on his table just as before, only the signs flanking the one proclaiming him the answer man had changed. The one on the left read $50 per 3 minutes, and the one on the right read, "Your first answer is free." I guess even magic isn't immune to inflation, Phil thought. Meanwhile, the answer man was looking at him with lively interest. "Do I know you?" he asked and chuckled. "Don't answer that. You're not the answer man, I am. Just let me think." Like a creature in a fairy tale, he laid his finger to one side of his nose. "I've got it. You're just Phil. You wanted to know if your girl would marry you, although you knew she would, and if you'd come to live in this little village, although you knew that too." They were impotent questions, Phil said. "Yes, they were. They were indeed. Sit down, just Phil. If that is, you'd like to do some business. If not, you are of course free to go on your way. Freedom is what makes America great, or so they say." A bell rang loudly not far away. The doors of the new elementary school flew open. Yelling kids carrying book satchels and lunch boxes fled out the doors as if from an explosion. One of them was undoubtedly his son, although in the general scrum, Phil couldn't pick him out. There were lots of boys wearing Red Sox caps. 2 school buses were ready to take in those who lived more than a mile away. Phil sat down in the client's chair. He started to ask if this strange roadside salesman was human or some sort of supernatural being, but he must have learned at least a few things between 25 and 39 because he shut his mouth before he could waste his free question. Of course, the answer man wasn't a human being. No man looked exactly the same after 14 years. And no man could have known that he would survive close-range machine gun fire in Iniwata. What he said instead was, "Your price seems to have gone up." "For certain people," the answer man said, "so you knew I was coming." The answer man smiled. "You're trying to get information by making statements. I'm hep to that trick." "I'll just bet you are," Phil thought. "A real hep cat." Children were walking past the site of the future fire station now, and although kids were curious by nature, the few who looked at the vacant lot looked away without interest. "They don't see us, do they?" "Another question to which you know the answer, my friend. Of course they don't. Reality has folds, and we're currently in one of them. That's your free question. If you want to ask others, you have to pay. And in case you were wondering, I don't take checks." Feeling like a man in a dream, Phil took his wallet out of his hip pocket. In it were 3 20s and a 10. There were also a C-note for emergencies tucked in behind his driver's license. He gave the 10 and 2 of the 20s to the answer man, who made them disappear. He picked up his little bag, same bag, and took out the same oversized stopwatch. This time the numbers only went from 0 to 3, but there was the same ratcheting sound as he wound it up. "I hope you're ready, just Phil." He thought he was. There weren't any dilemmas this time. He was perfectly happy with the current course of his life, but he supposed men and women were always curious about the future. "I'm ready. Let's go." The answer man's reply was just as it had been on the day back in 1937. "So we begin." He clicked the lever on the back of his big clock. It began to tick, and the single hand started its journey from 3 to 2. Phil thought of his conversation with Blaylock Atherton, not a proposal but a possibility, a trial balloon. "If I'm asked, should I run?" The answer man raised an admonitory finger. "Have you forgotten what I told you about that word? I am the answer man, not your agony aunt." Phil hadn't forgotten exactly. He had just gotten used to asking questions that didn't advance matters, impotent questions, in fact. "All right, here's my question. Will I run for the U.S. Senate?" "No." "No?" "The answer won't change just because you ask the question again. In the meantime, Tempest is bigoting." "Is it because Sal won't want me to run?" "No." The single hand on the clock passed 2. "Is Atherton going to offer the chance to someone else?" "Yes." "Bastard," Phil said. But it was really a disappointment. "Yes, but not a big one. He had his law practice and it still engaged him, nor was he crazy about leaving New Hampshire for Washington, D.C. He was a country mouse and supposed he always would be. As he had 14 years ago, Phil changed direction. "Will Sal and Jake like the TV?" "Yes." A brief smile flickered across the answer man's face. Having thought of Jake, another question occurred to Phil. It was out of his mouth before he realized he might not want to know the answer. "Will my son play pro baseball?" "No." The hand on the clock passed 1 and headed for 0. "Any pro sport?" "No." This was more disappointing than hearing he wouldn't be asked to run for Senate, but was it surprising? It wasn't. Sports were a pyramid, and only those who were almost divinely talented reached the top. "College ball? Surely that will be on Jacob's grasp." "No." Like a gambler on a losing streak, he keeps throwing good money after bad. Phil asked, "High school ball? Surely." "No." Phil stared at the answer man, mystified and starting to be worried, starting to be scared, actually. Don't ask, he thought, and one of his mother's favorite sayings occurred to him. "Keep not at a keyhole, lest ye be vexed." The hand on the answer man's clock reached 0 and gave out its hoarse brang sound just before Phil asked his last question. "Is my son okay?" "I can't answer that, sorry. You were just a bit late, just Phil." "I was?" "No answer, of course not. His time was up." "I suppose I was. All right, I'll go again." "I can do that, can't I?" No answer, so Phil answered for himself. "I can, of course I can. The sign says for 3 minutes. He bent and slipped the 100 out from behind his license. "Just let me... Okay, here it is." He lifted his head and saw the sign now read, $200 per 3 minutes and no free answers. Wait, he said. That isn't what it said. He crooked me. As before, or almost, the answer man said, Perhaps you crooked yourself. And as before, the answer man seemed to be withdrawing as if on rails. The grayness started to come. Phil fought it with no success. He came to behind the wheel of the Buick, hearing a tapping on the passenger side window. Dad? Dad, wake up! He looked around, at first not sure where he was or when. Then he saw his son peering in at him. His friend Harry Washburn was with them, both wearing identical Red Sox caps. That slotted Phil into place. Not 1937, but 1951. Not a young man with the ink still wet on his law degree, but a war vet who was important enough in this part of New Hampshire to be considered a viable candidate for the U.S. Senate, a husband, a father. He leaned over and opened the door. Hey, kiddo, I must have dozed off. Jake wasn't interested in that. We missed the bus because we were playing Pepper behind the school, and can we have a ride home? What would you have done if I hadn't been here? Walked, of course, Dave said. Or hooked a ride from Mrs. Keene. She's nice. Pretty, too, Harry said. Well, hop in. I got something in North Conway you boys might like. Really? Jake got in front, Harry in back. What? You'll see. Phil looked at the spot where the answer man's table and umbrella had been. He looked in his wallet and saw the C-note, folded, small, behind his driver's license. Unless the whole thing had been a dream and he knew it hadn't been, he supposed the answer man must have put it back, or maybe I put it back myself. He drove home. On that note, boys and girls, we are going to our second music break. On this break, we have Hosni Bronx, originally from Jamaica, but also hailing from the Bronx of New York, with Strong Life and Free Child. We have King Cinnamon from Biafra, Nigeria, with Rosie, and then Nonye Korea from Ghana, South Africa, with Gabon. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
Babylon to make you suffer. Babylon to make you suffer. Babylon to make you suffer. What is desire? Young life. We are ready to fight. Hard life for my people. I don't know why my people live this life. I don't know why my people live this life. I don't know how to fight, 'cause my people suffer. What do you want, Babylon? I don't understand why this world is so strange, strange with my people. My people, you have to survive. Yeah, you must rebuild you and make your own way. You must not give up. The beginning of the revolt will start. We need to follow our true destiny. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, 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 yeah. I don't know, whoa, why my people live this life. I don't know, whoa, why my people live this life. The obstacle we face, yeah, is Babylon. The world is a good place, yeah, for our freedom. You take everything, you don't breathe anything, yeah, yeah. Young life, all anti-dread. We must believe in a magical, powerful force that unite us, and not just these people stay speechless again. We don't want to talk, no, it's time to fight, yeah. We start talking. Babylon make you suffer. 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 What the desire? Young life. We are ready to fight.
Oh yeah, it's Funky on the beat.
Suck my boost, you got my body loose. Anytime you talk me, you got me confused. Suck my boost, you got my body loose. Anytime you talk me, you got me confused. Cinnamon, cinnamon, do it softly. I said you wine your body, eat the sweetie, sweetie. Make it rock my body, I am feeling horny. Make it touch my body, I am feeling sweetie. Suck my boost, you got my body loose. Anytime you talk me, you got me confused. Suck my boost, you got my body loose. Anytime you talk me, you got me confused. All my men, they wear out. All my guys, they wear out. Imarama, Imarama, Rosie. Imarama, Imarama, Rosie. All my men, they wear out. All my guys, they wear out. Imarama, Imarama, Rosie. Imarama, Imarama, Rosie. Mukomukeji, go bere muketa. Oya mukomukeji, oya bere muketa. Daddy mu ekon, omo ni gbo mukeji. Daddy bere muketa, omo ni fún mi lẹ́yìn. Daddy fisi fisi, omo ni ẹjọ́. Daddy saucy saucy, omo ni ẹjọ́. Daddy kosi kosi, omo ni ẹjọ́. Daddy turn him pussy, omo ni ẹjọ́. Daddy and his baby, them dey for corner. Daddy begin the touch and the girl dey holla. Now daddy begin the open the shirt collar. Now something come out. Daddy begin the suck am. Daddy mu ekon, omo ni gbo mukeji. Daddy bere muketa, omo ni fún mi lẹ́yìn. Daddy fisi fisi, omo ni ẹjọ́. Daddy saucy saucy, omo ni ẹjọ́ ẹjọ́. All my men they gbero, all my guys they gbero. Imarama, Imarama Rosie, Imarama, Imarama Rosie. All my men they gbero, all my guys they gbero. Imarama, Imarama Rosie, Imarama, Imarama Rosie. Suck my boost, you got my body loose. Anytime you touch me, you got me confused. Suck my boost, you got my body loose. Anytime you talk me, you got me confused. Cinnamon, cinnamon, do it softly. I said you wine your body, eat the sweetie, sweetie. Make it rock my body, I am feeling horny. Make it touch my body, I am feeling sweetie. Suck my boost, you got my body loose. Anytime you talk me, you got me confused. Suck my boost, you got my body loose. Anytime you talk me, you got me confused. Daddy consist, how money? Ejo, daddy con 8. Daddy 120, how money? Ejo, daddy 18. Daddy 240, how money? Ejo, daddy 36. Daddy and the baby, them day for corner. Daddy begin the touch, and the girl they holler. Daddy begin the open the shell. I come to come, daddy begin the sucker. Daddy move, echo, how money kwe mukeji. Daddy bere muketa, how money fumi lane. Daddy fisi, how money? Ejo, daddy saucy, how money? Ejo. All my men they play roll. All my guys they play roll. Imarama.
Oh yeah, it's funky on the beat.
Welcome back, and thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. This is our third hour of the podcast. I hope you've been enjoying it so far, and we're gonna get back into the nitty-gritty. I'm gonna turn this down just a little bit, just in case it decides to get all crazy on me, all wackadood. The TV was a great success. The rabbit ears would only pull in WMUR out of Manchester. Pictures sometimes, well often, obscured by snow flurries. But once Phil put up the antenna, Parkers could indeed get two Boston stations, WNAC and WHDH. Phil and Sal enjoyed evening shows like The Red Skelton Hour and Schlitz Playhouse. But Jake did more than enjoy the television. He embraced it with all in fervor of a first love. He watched weekday matinee after school, where the same old movie played all week long. He watched Jack and Pat's Country Jamboree. He watched Boston Blackie. He watched ads for Camel cigarettes and Babo cleanser. On Saturday, he and his friends gathered as if in church to watch Crusader Rabbit, The Little Rascals, and thousands of old cartoons. Sally Ann was first amused, then uneasy. "He's addicted to that thing," she said, with no idea this carriaging cry would be repeated for generations to come. "He never plays catch with you when you come home anymore, just wants to watch some junky old Hopalong Cassidy movie he's seen 4 times already." Jake actually did want to have a catch sometimes, or hit behind the garage when Phil slow-pitched to him, but these occasions were rarer than they had been. In the pre-TV days, Jake would have been waiting for his dad on the front stoop with his glove on and his bat propped beside him. The truth was, Phil didn't mind his son's loss of interest as much as Sal did. Hold on, guys. Sorry, I lost my place. That pause in the music, I was like, okay, is this not on Auto DJ? But it seems that it is. When the answer man told him that Jake wouldn't play organized ball, no, not even in high school, his mind at first jumped, as any parents would, to dire possibilities. Now it seemed the reason was more prosaic. Jake was just losing interest in baseball, as Phil himself had lost interest in learning to play the piano when he was about Jake's age. Inspired by shows like The Lone Ranger and Wild Bill Hickok, Jake started to write his own Western stories. Each came with an exclamation mark and bore titles like Run Down at Laramie and Shootout at Dead Man's Canyon. They were lurid, but not half bad, at least on the opinion of the author's father. Perhaps someday he would be a writer instead of an outfielder for the Boston Red Sox. Phil thought that would be a fine thing. Blaylock Atherton called one evening and asked if Phil had thought any more about running for the Senate. Perhaps not this time, but what about 56? Phil said he was considering it. He told Atherton that Sally Ann wasn't crazy about the idea, but said she would support him if that was his decision. "Well, don't consider too long," Atherton said. "In politics, we have to think ahead. Tempus fugit, you know." "So I've heard," Phil said. One Saturday morning in February of 1952, Harry Washburn came into Phil's closet of a home study, where Phil was going over depositions for an upcoming trial. He was alarmed to see a streak of blood on one of Harry's freckled cheeks and more on his hand. "Did you hurt yourself, Harry?" "It's not time," Harry said. "Jake has a nosebleed and it won't stop. He got blood all over his Roy Rogers shirt, top to bottom." Phil thought that had to be the exaggeration until he saw for himself. On the Zenith's round screen, Annie Oakley was shooting it out with a bad guy, but none of the 4 or 5 little boys was paying attention to anything but Jake. His favorite shirt, his Saturday morning cowboy watching shirt, was indeed soaked with blood. He was the lap of his jeans. Jake looked at his father and said, "It won't stop." His voice was clogged and nasal. Phil told the other boys to watch the show. Everything was fine, 5 by 5. He kept his voice level, but the amount of blood he was looking at scared him badly. He took Jake into the kitchen, made him sit down and tilt his head back, then filled a dishcloth with ice cubes and pressed it to the top of the boy's nose. "Hold it there, Jaco, it'll stop." Sally Ann breezed in from a trip to the IGA, saw Jake's blood-soaked shirt, and drew in breath to scream. Phil shook his head at her, and she didn't. Kneeling beside him, she asked what had happened. "Did one of your friends punch you in the nose playing cowboys?" "No, it just started. There's blood on the floor, but I didn't get any on your blue rug, at least." "I got it on me, too," Sammy Dillon said. He and Harry had come into the kitchen. The other boys were standing behind them. "But I washed it off." "That's good, Sammy," Sally Ann said. "I think you and the rest of the guys had better go home now." They went willingly enough, only pausing at the kitchen door to get a final look at their gore-spattered friend. When they were gone, Sally Ann leaned over her son and whispered to Phil, "I don't think it's stopping." "It will," Phil said. It didn't. It slowed from the original shirt-soaking gusher to continued seep. The Parkers' local doc was on vacation, so they took him to the hospital in North Conway, where Richmond, the on-call MD, peered up Jake's nose with a little light and nodded. "We'll fix that in a jiff, young man. Mother and Dad are going to wait outside while we do our biz." Sal wanted to stay, but Phil, having an idea of what the fix would entail, took her by the arm and escorted her firmly out into the waiting room and closed the door, which did not do any good at all. I don't know if you guys heard that, but something just hit my door. Because when his nose was cauterized, Jake's house filled the small hospital from end to end. Phil and Sally Ann clutched each other, both of them shedding tears, waiting for it to be over. Eventually it was, and wasn't. Dr. Richmond came out with one lapel of his white coat dotted with Jake's blood. He smiled and said, "Brave kid. That's no fun. Can I talk to your parents a minute, Jacob?" He took them into the exam room. "Have you seen the bruising?" "Sure, a couple on his arm," Phil said. "He's a boy, Dr. Richmond. He probably got them climbing trees or something." "On his chest as well? Scrapper, is he?" "No, not really," Phil said. "He and his friends sometimes tussle, but it's all in fun." "I want to do a blood test," Dr. Richmond said. "Just crossing T's, you know." "Oh my God," Sally said. Later she would tell Phil that she knew, right then, she knew. Took his white count and his platelets, rule out anything serious. "Doc, it was just a nosebleed," Phil said. "Bring him back in, Phil," Sally Ann said. She had a white look around her eyes and mouth that Phil became very familiar with over the next year or so. Phil brought Jake back into the exam room, and once he had been assured that a blood draw would be a walk in the park compared to having his nose cauterized, Jake rolled up his sleeve and took the needle stoically. A week later, their family doctor called and told them he was sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it looked like Jake had acute lymphocytic leukemia. Their sturdy son went downhill fast. 8 months into what was then called the wasting disease, Jake had a remission that gave his parents several weeks of cruel hope. Then came the crash. Jacob Theodore Parker died in Portsmouth Regional Hospital on March 23, 1953, at the age of 10. Sal laid her head on her husband's shoulder during most of Jake's closing ceremony. She cried. Phil did not. His tears had been used up during Jake's last hospital stay. Sal had hoped for another remission right to the end, prayed for it, but Phil knew Jake was going down. The answer man had as much told him so. Later that day, he asked himself if he had smelled gin or her breath at the funeral. If he did, it would hardly have been worth noticing. Parkers were part of the booze and cigarettes generation. Sally Ann had been enjoying light cocktails with her mother and father and their friends since she was 16, and there were always cocktails waiting when Phil came home. 2 before dinner was the usual. Sometimes Phil would have a can or 2 of beer while they watched TV. Sal would have another gin and tonic. It was only later that Phil looked back and realized that on G&T in the evening had progressed to 2 and sometimes 3. But she was always up at 6 making Jake's school lunch and breakfast for the 3 of them. It was also the generation of females cook, males eat. He did notice at the reception after the graveside ceremony there was no way not to. Sal was in the kitchen telling Mrs. Keene a story about Jake losing his first tooth, how she had looped one end of the thread around that troublesome wiggler and tied the other to the knob of his bedroom door. When I slammed the door, that tooth flew right out, Sal said. Only tooth came out tooth, and Phil saw Mrs. Keene, the pretty one, Harry had said on the day Phil met the answer man for the second time, easing back from her, a step at a time. Easing back from her breath, Sal matched her first step, commencing a second story. She had a pony glass in one hand, tilting slowly so what was in it slopped on the floor. Phil took her by the arm and told her his folks wanted to see her. They didn't. Sal came willingly enough, but looked back over her shoulder to say, "That tooth just flew. Gosh, what a sight." Mrs. King gave Phil a commiserating smile. It was the first of many. He got Sal as far as the doorway to the living room before her knees buckled. The glass dropped from her hand. He caught it and had a memory, momentary but oh God so brilliant, of catching a return throw from Jake behind the garage. He got her through the groups of people in the living room, by then supporting almost all of her weight. His mother gave him a look and nodded. "Get her out of here." Phil nodded back. There was no point trying to take her upstairs, so he half carried her into the guest room and laid her down among the coats of the mourners. She began to snore immediately. When Phil came back, he had told folks that Sal was overcome with grief and felt she couldn't see people at least for a while. There were sympathetic nods and more murmurs of condolence. So many condolences that Phil found himself wishing someone would crack a dirty joke about the farmer's daughter. But he was pretty sure there were people, Mrs. Keene for one, his mom for another, who knew it wasn't just grief that had overcome his wife. It was the first lie he told about her drinking, but not the last. Phil suggested that they might try for another baby. Sal agreed with a kind of listless, what-doesn't-matter lack of interest. Sometimes he wanted to grasp her by the shoulders hard enough to hurt, to leave bruises, to get through to her, and tell her that she wasn't the only one who'd lost a child. He didn't. He kept his anger to himself, knowing what she'd say. "You have your work. I have nothing." But she did. She had her Gilby's gin and her cool cigarettes, 2 packs a day. She kept them in a little alligator case that looked like a change purse. She became pregnant in 1954. He suggested she quit smoking. She suggested he should keep his advice, however well meant, to himself. She miscarried in her 4th month. "No more of that," she told him from her bed in North Conway Hospital. "I'm 40, too old to have a baby." So it was back to the French letters, but on New Year's Eve of 1956, Phil realized he still had 3 rubbers left in a box of a dozen he'd purchased in North Conway, not long after Easter. Sally Ann was willing enough to lift her nightgown and take him into herself, but when he looked at her and saw her looking at the ceiling, he knew she was just waiting for him to spin and get off her. This was not conducive to intimacy. Only once in 1957 did Phil tackle her about the drinking. He told her that if she had to go to one of those drying out spas to quit or at least cut down, he had found a good one in Boca Raton, far enough from New Hampshire that no one would know. He could say she was visiting friends. He could say even that they were separating if that was what she wanted, but she had to stop. She looked at him, his now overweight wife with the bad complexion and the dull eyes and the clumpy hair. He found her eyes especially fascinating. There were no depths there. "Why?" she said. On the evening of November 8th, 1960, Phil came home to an empty house. There was a note on the kitchen counter that said, "Dinner in oven. I have gone to GD to watch election results. Come in, S." There was no invitation for Phil to join her, and he had never cared much for the Green Door in North Conway anyway. Once around the time he and Sal were married, it had been quite a nice bar. Now it was a dive. According to the police report, Mrs. Parker left the Green Door at approximately 12:40 a.m. on the morning of November 9th, shortly after Kennedy had been declared the winner. The bartender cut her off at 11, but allowed her to stay and watch the returns. Coming home on Route 16, driving at a high rate of speed, her little Renault Dauphine veered off the road and struck a bridge abutment. Death was instantaneous. Post-mortem report blood alcohol level was 0.39. Upon hearing the news that his daughter was dead, Tad Alberton suffered a heart attack. After 5 days in intensive care, he died. The back-to-back funerals almost made Phil wish he were back in Niwatan. 3 weeks after the death of his wife, Phil drove to the Curry Volunteer Fire Station, where there had once been a vacant lot. It was late and the fire station was dark. Between the red-painted double doors was a manger scene. Jesus, Mary, Joseph, wise men, and assorted animals. The manger was, to the best of Phil's memory, the exact place where a red umbrella had once shaded the answer man's little table. "Come here and talk to me," Phil said to the windy darkness. From the pocket of his overcoat, he took a roll of bills. "I've got 800 here, maybe even 1,000, and I've got a few questions. Number one, was it an accident, or did she kill herself?" "Nothing, just the empty lot, the empty fire station, a cold east wind, and a bunch of stupid plaster statuary lit by a hidden electric bulb. Number two is why? Why me? I know that sounds like self-pity, and I'm sure it is, but I'm honestly curious. That fucking Dummock's friend of Jake's, Harry Washburn, is still alive. He's a plumber's apprentice down in Somersworth. Sammy Dillon is alive too, so why not my boy? If Jake was alive, Sally would be alive, right? So tell me. I guess I don't even want to know why me after all. I want to know why at all. Come on, fella, get out here. Wind up your clock and take my money." "Nothing, of course." "You were never there at all, were you? You were just a figment of my fucking imagination, so fuck you, and fuck me, and fuck the whole fucking world." Phil spent the following 3 years in a daze of systemic depression. He did his work, always showed up for court on time, won some cases, lost others. Didn't much care either way. Sometimes he dreamed of the answer man, and in some of these dreams he leaped across the table and knocked the ticking stock clock off the ground and locked his hands around the answer man's neck. But the answer man always faded away to nothing, like smoke. because really that was what he had been, wasn't he? Just smoke. That period of his life ended with the burned woman. Her name was Christine Lacasse, but Phil always thought of her as the burned woman. One day in the early spring of 1964, his secretary came into his office looking pale and distraught. Phil thought there were tears in Mary's eyes, but wasn't sure until she wiped one away with the heel of her hand. Phil asked if she were all right. "Yes, but there's a woman here to see you, and I wanted to warn you before I sent her in. She's been burned, and badly. Her face, Phil, her face is terrible." "What does she want?" "She says she wants to sue the New England Freedom Corporation for $5 million. Phil smiled. That would be a trick, wouldn't it? New England Freedom did business in the 6 states stretching from Presque Isle to Providence. They had grown into one of the biggest development companies in the Northland during post-war years, that Phil supposed were now over. They built housing developments, shopping centers, industrial centers, even prisons. "You better send her in, Marie. Thanks for preparing me." Not that anything could truly prepare him for the woman who shuffled in on 2 canes. From the left side of her face, Phil guessed she might be in her late 40s or early 50s. The right side of her face was buried in a landslide of flesh that had melted and then hardened. The hand gripping the cane on that side was a claw. She saw his expression, and the left side of her mouth pulled up in a smile that showed the few teeth remaining to her. "Pretty, ain't I?" she said. Her voice was as harsh as a crow's caw. Phil guessed she had inhaled the fire that had burned her and scorched her vocal cords. He supposed she was lucky to be able to speak at all. Phil had no intention of responding to a question that had to be rhetorical or downright sarcastic. "Sit down, Miss Lacasse, and tell me what I can do for you." "It's Mrs. I'm widowed. A widowed woman, don't you know, as to what you can do for me, you can sue the shit out of NEF." She pronounced it Neff. $5 million, not a penny more or a penny less. Not that you will, I'd bet a cracker I've been to half a dozen other lawyers, including Feld and Pillsbury in Portland, and not one of them will have anything to do with me or my case. Neff's too big of 'em. For 'em, even. Can I have a glass of water before you kick me out?" He buzzed Marie and asked her to bring Mrs. Lacasse a glass of water. Meanwhile, the burned woman was fumbling with her good hand in a little pack cinched around her waist. She brought out a bottle of pills and thrust them across Phil's desk. "Open these for me, would you? I can do it myself, but it hurts like a bugger. I want 2, no, 3. Phil opened the brown bottle, shook out 3 pills, handed them across to her, and recapped the bottle. Marie came in with the water, and Lacasse swallowed the pills. "It's the morph, don't you know? For pain. Talking hurts. Well, everything hurts, but it's talking that's the worst. Eating ain't no fun either. Doctor says these pills will kill me in a year or 3. I said they won't kill me until I get my case in court. I'm fixed on that, Lawyer Parker." "They're starting to work good. Take another, but then I'd get sloppy. Start putting things in the wrong order. Tell me how I can help," Phil said. She threw back her head and gave a witch's cackle. He saw that part of her neck had run down into her shoulder. "Let me sue the shit out of those fuckers. That's how you can help." And with that, she told her tale. Christine Lacasse had lived with her husband and 5 children in Morrow Estates, a Neff-built community in the town of Albany, just south of North Conway. The lights in their house kept fizzing on and off, and sometimes smoke drifted out of the electrical sockets. Ronald Lacasse was a long-haul truck driver, making good money, but gone much of the time. Christine Lacasse did ladies' hair at home, and her dryers and blowers were always shorting out. One day, the electrical panel in the utility rooms of their 4-house block caught fire, and they had no power for almost a week. Christine, not yet the burned woman, talked to the estate superintendent, who merely shrugged and blamed New Hampshire Power and Light. "I knew better than that," she told Phil, sipping at her water. "I didn't fall off a hay truck yesterday. A power surge wouldn't cause the electric panels of 4 houses to catch a fire. The fuses would blow first. Other blocks of houses in Morrow Estates had problems with their lights and their electric heat, but nothing like ours." When she got no satisfaction from the super, she called Neff's Portsmouth office, spoke to a functionary there, and got the runaround. She investigated the corporation bigwigs at the North Conway Library, found the number for Neff's Boston HQ, and called them, and asked to speak to the president. No, she was told he was far too busy to speak to a housewife from East Overshoe, New Hampshire. She had another functionary instead, probably one with a better salary and better suits than the Portsmouth functionary. She told the Boston fellow that sometimes when the power was flickering, the wall in her little home salon got hot, and she could hear a buzzing like there were wasps in there. He said she could smell a kind of frying. The functionary told her that she was probably using hair dryers and blowers with a voltage too high for the electrical system. Mrs. Lacasse inquired if his mother had any kids who lived and hung up. That Christmas, Neff put a Christmas light all over Morrow Estates. Corporation did that, Phil asked, not the homeowners association in the estates. Didn't have no homeowners association, she told Phil. Nothing like that. Everyone got a flyer from Neff in their mailbox after Thanksgiving. Said they were doing it in the spirit of the season. Just out of the goodness of their hearts, Phil said, scribbling in his legal pad. The burned woman gave her a witch's cackle and pointed one deformed, half-melted finger at him. "Like you. You kicked me out like all the others, but I like you. And none of the others wrote down anything I said." "Do you still have that flyer?" "Mine burned up, but I've got a pile of other ones just like it." "I want one. No, I want all of them. Tell me about the fire." She said her husband was home that Christmas. The presents were under the tree 2 nights before the holiday, with the kids all tucked up in their beds. Dreams of sugar plums optional. Their house and the Duffy's house next door caught fire. Christine was wakened by screams from outside. The house was full of smoke, and she saw no flames. What she saw out the bedroom window was Rona Duffy, her next-door neighbor, rolling around in the snow trying to put out her flaming nightgown. The house of theirs was burning like a birthday candle. I shook Ronald awake and told him to get the kids out, but he never did. By then I was out the door and throwing snow over Rona. Mrs. Lacasse added matter-of-factly, "She died. Her 2 kids were with her ex-husband in Rutland, luckily for them. Mine weren't so lucky. I don't know what happened to them. I think the smoke must have gotten to Ronnie before he could get them. I went back in to do it myself, and half the goddamn living room ceiling fell on me. Lawyer Parker, that house went up 6 flicks to a dozen. I crawled out on fire, and you know what happened during the year I was in the hospital? They played beanbag with the blame until that old beanbag disappeared." Phil said, "Is that about right?" The twisted finger pointed at him again. She gave another cackle. Phil thought it was the way the damned in hell must laugh. Neff said it was the fault of the company that did the wiring. The company that did the wiring said the state had inspected both the Christmas lights and the original wiring specifications. So it was the state's fault. The state said the specs weren't the same as the actual wiring in the houses still standing, and the engineering firm must have cheated to save money. The engineering company said they took their orders from New England Freedom Corps, and Do you know what New England Freedom Corps said? Sue us if you don't like it, Phil said. Sue us if you don't like us. It is exactly right. A big old corporation against a woman who looks like a chicken that got left in the oven too long. Okay, I said. See you in court. They did offer me a settlement, $40,000, and I turned them down. I want $5 million, one for each of my children, 14 to 3 years old. They can have my husband for free. He should have got him out. Now, is it time for me to go? For the first time since Sal died, maybe for the first time since Jake died, Phil felt a stirring of real interest, also outrage. He liked the idea of going against a heavyweight corporation, not for the money, although his piece of $5 million would be considerable. Not for the publicity, because he had all the business he could handle, or wanted to handle. It was something else. It was a chance to get his hands around a neck that wouldn't fade away like smoke. No, Phil said. It's not time for you to go. Phil pursued New England freedom relentlessly for the next 5 years. His father disproved, saying Phil had a Don Quixote complex, accusing him of letting his other cases slide. Phil said that was probably true, but pointed out that he no longer had to save up to send his son to Harvard, and John, old John by then, never said another word about the case. At Alberton's window, the widow said that she understood and was with him 100%. You're doing it because you can't sue the cancer that took Jakey, she said. Phil didn't disagree. There might have been an element of truth in what she said, but he was really doing it because he couldn't get the answer man out of his mind. Sometimes when he couldn't sleep, he'd tell himself he was being foolish. The answer man wasn't responsible for his misfortunes or for those of the burned woman. All that was true, but something else was as well. When he really needed answers, the man with the red umbrella was gone. And like Mrs. Lacasse, he had to hold somebody responsible. He got Neff into Boston District Court shortly before Mrs. Lacasse came down with pneumonia. He won. Neff appealed, as Phil and Christine had known they would, but she did have that one conditional victory before the pneumonia took her off in the fall of 1967. By then, Phil had seen her wasting away almost by the day and knew, just as he'd known with Jake, that the writing was on the wall. He added Ronald Lacasse's brother to the case. Tim Lacasse had none of the burned woman's thirst for revenge, none of her fervor. He told Phil to go at it, knock himself out, and follow the case from his home in North Carolina. He refused to pay any fees, but would be happy to take some money if it fell out of the sky. Lifted down south from Boston or New Hampshire. Burned woman left no estate. Phil continued anyway, paying expenses out of his own pocket. Twice Neff offered to settle, first for $300,000, then for $800,000. The publicity was making them très uncomfortable. Tim Lacasse urged Phil, via long distance, to take the money. Phil refused. He wanted the whole $5 million because it was what Mrs. Lacasse had wanted. $1 million for each child. There were delays, there were continuances. Neff lost in the First Circuit and appealed yet again. But when the Supreme Court refused to hear their case, they ran out of road. The final bill for the Christmas lights, the straw that broke the camel's back, and the shitty wiring Phil proved was standard Neff policy, focusing on other developments and corporation had built, was $7.4 million awarded to plaintiff Tim Lacasse, plus considerable court costs. Neff, initially unable to believe it, could not outlast a country lawyer from East Overshoe, could have saved almost $2.5 million by giving up. Tim Lacasse threatened to sue, and Phil informed him that they would be splitting the award right down the middle. Go right ahead, Phil said. Your $3.7 million melt like snow in April. Tim Lacasse finally agreed to the split, and on a day in 1970, Phil hung a framed picture on his office wall, where he would see it first thing every day. The picture showed Ronald and Christine Lacasse on their wedding day. He was beefy and grinning. In her white wedding gown, Christine looked drop-dead gorgeous. Below the photograph were 6 words in capitals Phil had carefully lettered himself. Always remember, others have it worse. Following the final adjudication of the suit against New England Freedom, a case that made him something of a star in legal circles, Phil could have had all the work he wanted. He eased up on the throttle instead, and because he was now financially comfortable, he began to take a greater number of pro bono cases. In 1978, 14 years before the Innocence Project was founded, he got a new trial and eventually freedom for a man who had served 12 years of a life sentence in New Hampshire State Prison. There was a hole in his life where Jake and Sal had been, of course. Legal work couldn't fill it, so he became more active in the community. He served as a trustee for the Curry Public Library and inaugurated the first Curry Book Festival. He did PSAs on the New Hampshire TV channels for the annual statewide blood drive. He worked 1 evening a week at the North Conway Food Bank because others have it worse, and 1 evening a week at Harvest Hills, the animal shelter across the state line in Freiburg. In 1979, he got a beagle puppy there. Frank went with him everywhere for the next 14 years riding shotgun. He did not remarry, but he had a lady friend down the road in Moulton Borough who he visited from time to time. Her name was Sarah Combs, or Coombs. He did her legal work and paid off the mortgage on her house. He and Frank didn't always spend the night, but Sarah kept a bag of Gainsburgers in her pantry for those times when they did. These visits grew rare as the years passed. Phil was more likely to go home when the day was finished and microwave whatever his housekeeper and woman of general work left for him. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes he was struck by the emptiness of the house. On those occasions, he'd call Frank to his side and scratch him behind the ears and tell him that others had it worse. The one community job he refused was co-coaching the Curry Little League team. That was just too close to home for just Phil. So the time passed, so the story was told. For the most part, it was good time. There were scars, but not disfiguring ones, and what were scars after all but wounds that had healed. Picked up a limp and began to walk with a cane. Mary retired. He began to suffer arthritis in his hands, feet, and hips. Mary died. He announced his retirement, and the town, Curry, was now on the verge of becoming a small city. Through him, one hell of a party. He was given many presents, including a plaque proclaiming him Curry's #1 citizen. Several speeches were made, culminating in Phil's address to a gathering that almost filled the auditorium of the new high school. It was a modest address, it was witty, and most of all it was short. He needed to piss like a racehorse. Frank the Beagle died peacefully in the fall of 1993. Phil buried him in the backyard, digging the hole with his own hands, although his joints squalled in protest at every shovelful. When the grave was filled and patted down and resodded, he gave a funeral oration, also short. "I loved you, old boy, still do." That was the year Phil turned 81. In 1995, he began to suffer migraines for the first time in his life. He went to see Dr. Barlow, who he still thought of as the new doc, although Phil had been seeing him for checkups and arthritis for 10 years. Barlow asked him if he was having double vision with the headaches. Phil said he was, and admitted that sometimes he found himself in different parts of the house when the headaches eased up, without remembering how he got there. Dr. Barlow sent him to Portsmouth for an MRI. "Not such good news," said the new doc after examining the results. "It's a brain tumor." Then, as if congratulating him, "Quite rare in a man your age." Barlow recommended a neurologist at Mass General because Phil no longer drove except around town. He hired a young fellow named Logan Phipps to chauffeur him. Logan talked a great deal about his family, his friends, his girl, the weather, his part-time job, his desire to go back to school. Other things as well. It all went in one of Phil's less than acute ears and out the other, but he nodded along. It came to him on the ride that he began to separate from life. It wasn't a big deal. It was like tearing a supermarket coupon slowly but steadily along a perforation. The neurologist examined Phil and examined the scans of Phil's elderly brain. He told Phil he could operate and take that nasty brain tumor right out, which made Phil think of an old song where a girl proclaimed she was going to wash that man right out of her hair. Sal frequently sang it in the shower, sometimes while she was washing her own hair, which Phil never took personally. When Phil asked the neurologist what the odds were that he would wake up from that operation and as himself, the neuro guy told him 50-50. Phil said he was sorry, but at his age, those odds weren't good enough. Your headaches may be quite bad before. The neuro guy shrugged, not quite wanting to say before the end. Others have it worse, Phil said. Oh my goodness. Well, that came at a good time so far as the ending goes. You guys, thank you so much once again for hanging out with me tonight. It was a pleasure and honor and, I don't know, a thrill entertaining you. I hope you enjoyed the story just as much as I did. I want to thank all my friends on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Out there, wherever you may be listening Beyond the Omniverse tonight. I had a wonderful time and I can't wait to do it again tomorrow night when we will be doing trippy TikToks with me, TessaTNT. Don't forget, we are all in this together. Together we can make the world a little better, and together, my friends, we are Paradox Media, because without you, there is no us. Please, if you have the means, ability, or initiative, if you believe in what I am doing here, or just enjoy hanging out with me on the airwaves, sling or fling some green my way, and it would really help me keep this mothership afloat. Places you can donate are by mail, P.O. Box 663, Bayfield, Colorado 81122, Cash App at $TessaTNT, PayPal at TessaTNT, and Venmo at Tessa-Thomas-Peterson. Nighty night, love and light to all my yous out there, and I will see you back here. Same creepy time, same creepy place. Nighty night, love and light.